now let's talk about public key. And we'll just say here, it complements, or is it complements? I think it's complements. Complements symmetric key. So remember, with symmetric key, we couldn't share it, or we wanted to share it secretly. With symmetric key, what do we have here? We didn't like all those different keys that we had to have. And we'll talk about the changing the key in a little bit. So what happens here is we can use public key is used to share the secret symmetric key. Someone's got my Bob and Alice diagram, so I can't show you. No, that's all right. Just hold on to it. So the public key is used to share the secret symmetric key. So you can see here, if I'm Alice and I want to talk to Bob, I can encrypt a key and send the key to Bob. Okay? I didn't note a public key, the message size is limited by the length of the key. So if I have a 128-bit key, I can have a 128-bit message for the max, okay? So the maximum message I can encrypt with a 128-bit key of a public key is that. Fortunately, that's the perfect size to share a symmetric key, right? Be like, hey, I want to talk to you. Be like, okay, here's my public key. And then I can go and say, okay, here's that key, and send him the key, right? So that's one thing. The next thing is, we already noted, we only need one public key. Public key. We always switch because public key uses a lot of computation. Okay, the encryption process using it in public key is a lot, whereas symmetric is relatively little. That's again why we typically use a symmetric key. We start with public key and then switch to a symmetric key. There is one sort of larger disadvantage, is that public key needs, I don't know, a public key infrastructure. Infrastructure. Okay, there needs to be a key authority. And you all don't ever see this, but it's all over your internet stuff. A key authority is sort of the master server that distributes the key pairs. And the key pair, by the way, is called a certificate. Okay. So a key authority distributes a key pair, and it also revokes compromised keys. So we just had Heartbleed, right? One of the things of Heartbleed was it would actually give someone your private key, wherever that is. So Heartbleed, someone could ping Bob all the time and get bits of his memory, and eventually Bob's private key would be in that memory. That's awesome, right? That's a great attack. And so once Bob's private key is out there, Bob is compromised completely, because people can take Bob's private key and pretend to be someone else. But if we have this certificate authority that can say, hey, Bob got hacked when he was on Heartbleed, his key is now revoked, then you would look it up and see that it's revoked. That kind of makes sense, right? So if you've ever seen on your web browser, it'll say like, this key is expired. Sometimes it'll say this key is expired. And if For these Heartbleed ones, it should say it's been revoked, if you ever hit one that's revoked. By the way, if Bob just changes his key, it's usually okay, because you would just get another, if I was Emily, if Bob has changed his key, he'll just give me the new public key and everything works fine. But if I go to use, if I have an old key of Bob's, I'm actually supposed to check with the certificate authority. And I'll say, hey, is this Bob? You guys following me here? So I have a public key here, and that's just what normally happens. We'll go in a little more detail here. When I go to talk to Bob, Bob will give me his public key, and I should check, is that Bob's? And the authority might say, no, that's been revoked. Or, no, that's not really Bob. So stuff like that. And that's how Emily can be sure she's talking to Bob. So that's fun. Public key needs an infrastructure. So that's kind of a hassle.